toward the One,
the
the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance.
So here we are, loved ones. This is the fourth of the 5 classes on the Human Divine Summer School. So we are going to explore some more about the relationship between the human and divine that we speak of as beings of both human and divine. So what does that mean? Well, I think more than anything, it means that relationship. What is the relationship between these two aspects, these two sides? And that relationship is a relationship of love, definitely. But when we say love, that can mean many different kinds of things. But imagine the love between these two sides of our own being, these two sides of this created and yet united being, divine being. It must be a very essentially divine and exquisite kind of love, evolved kind of love. So I turn to Ibn Arabi in this quest to find the love that is between these two. And there were many different, if you look at Alone with the Alone, you can also, in the dialectic of love, find different ways of expressing this love. First love being one, just the natural love, he calls it, which really is about possessing and seeking satisfaction of our own desires. Well, we see that kind of love in the world around us, and we also experience that kind of love. Well, this is definitely not the love we're speaking of in this relationship, but it is, you can think about your own life and going through your day and going through experiences, and of course we do express this kind of love, the things that are around us that we care for and that we need and that others need. But there's another love beyond that that he calls spiritual love. And this spiritual love is one that we might have heard of in our experiences in churches and traditional worship, in that it's a will to be adequate to the Creator, to comply with what the Creator wishes. So this would be a looking of the human part to the divine and following what that is given by the divine. And there's a beauty to that. And at the same time, we can see that there's some other things that should be added to that kind of love. But in the spiritual love, there is great transformation, for sure, of the manifest side that is trying to become harmonized with the divine. So there is a beauty in that. But we can reach farther than that one, to what Ibn Arabi calls the divine love. Could be the mystical love also. Well, this one recognizes that indeed, in the beginning, the Creator wanted to manifest, he yearned, or she yearned to be known, yearned to be loved, and it required a creation. And that kind of love now that we're speaking of for the created, from the created to God, who was the Creator, is the desire of this revealed God within the Creator to return to the Creator who you yearned to be known. So this is again a kind of harmonizing or responding to the love that was expressed in the beginning that created all of the manifestation. And in this kind of relationship, as even Arby continued to describe reality in these terms, the divine would manifest and through the creation in empathy and sympathy to this created being. So that as we look around in a world that you could say, well, we're separated from everything in the world, there became relatedness, which is called theophany in this Christian tradition, that God is bursting forth in the world around us. So this is getting closer to the relationship of the human divine, so that now we're experiencing something that seems to unite us and bring us closer to all that is around us and all of that is in manifestation as well as beyond manifestation. As we feel the qualities that are present in everything, as we feel the essences that burst through as we experience that divine that's around us, that suffuses all of creation, and that we have an inner knowing that goes way beyond what we perceive in creation. So this would be what is called the divine. But we would like to introduce a further concept, a further development of this idea of love. Could it be that God yearned for a manifest creature who could realize him herself as a co-creator and love God with a newly created love, a unique love, so that now God is not just seeing a reflection of God's self in creation, but unique expressions that come through, that only a being who had manifested in that unique form, in that unique consciousness, could create. So what do we have here? We have God being surprised, the divine unfolding into new creation, which sounds familiar, doesn't it, to what our purposes are in this human divine work that we are proposing. Would you like to offer something here?
Yeah, so you could look at these different types of love in terms of different developmental stages along the spiritual journey. And and there's many ways you could look at this unfoldment. We've talked about the significant shift from a dualistic perspective and way of relating and feeling separated. We've talked about relational unity. We've talked about many forms of traditional spirituality in which the aim is just merging back into the one. But all along the way, this process of unfoldment is fueled by desire. So, excuse me, the desire in that first level of love where you're feeling separate and you're wanting something in order to feel completion. So there is that desire. You feel like this thing that you're seeking, that you love, is going to bring completion to you. But the problem with that, and Buddhism talks about this, is once you get what you are seeking in a particular desire, then there'll be another desire, either for more of that or something now even better. And there's no end to that. You can never really fulfill that desire as long as you're in a state of separation. And we've also talked about the alchemical process, the process of transformation, instead of thinking as just what's happening on our, in quotes, end, our manifest end. It's really a transformation of this relationship. So what Ravani Ra was talking about God being surprised, God discovering something that was previously unknown is key here. So this is a really significant shift in the way we can view spirituality. It's not a realization of something that is or has been, that's just out there somewhere, even if you think of it as this infinite ocean of wisdom or bliss or whatever it is that you are just trying to realize. But what's unique, I think, about Sufism is it's talking about the whole thing is this never-ending relationship between the two sides. It's this never-ending way of loving between the two sides that is continually unfolding by what we bring to it. And what do we bring to it? We bring the fruits of our human experience, that which has been gained in life. And then we become capable of establishing that relationship with the divine, where something can emerge from what we've talked about in many classes, the barzakh, or the meeting place.
So this human divine in manifestation and also reaching beyond manifestation is experiencing several realms. Kind of like Azubash was just explaining about the development of the being, that we not only reach and see what is around us and begin to experience the divine in manifestation that way, we also, as you said, Azubash, the experiencing the barzakh through this intermediary or this interface, we experience, pardon me, the realm, for example, of the imaginal, which we call different things. It could be called the jinn realm or the realm of genius. It could be the dream states. That as we realize things in the manifest world, there's also a flow of realization and love through, let's just say, the imaginal realm. We experience things perhaps in dream states, and as we imagine even our relationship with all that is beyond the world that we see with the five senses, and then merging into the next realm of the angelic, which is also the realm of light. This love that we have and that we share with the divine is manifest in terms of Svarna, which is the light that unites all things and the light from which everything is made. And the relationship keeps on going through the realm of the qualities is the next realm, that we begin to experience those qualities that we've spoken about before that seem to be just concepts at first, are actually transformed through our own experiences in life and made more adamant, was one word that we were using, so that as we realize in life, and we think we're just saying practices sometimes, but there is something that is made more real instead of just a possibility through our own efforting, through our own loving, through our own recognizing qualities in those that we love, that has an effect on all these different realms. There's a realm of mystery that comes beyond that, which is one in which there's nothing to be seen or recognized, but still that essence flows through even the realm of mystery, so that what good is this, all that's happening in this process? In your own manifestation, you are having an effect on all the different realms. And so those that experience those other realms also are given a boost, you could say, to their realization. There is this flow that is happening And it comes from that relationship of yourself and the divine part of yourself. Anything to add to that?
Yeah. So again, some key points to be mindful of and what we're talking about is this process of unfoldment is not something that's solely happening on what we think of as our end, our human side of things. It's also happening on what we think of as the divine or the transcendent side of things. And why is that? Because we're both. We are this being of biunity that even Arby talks about. But it is a major, major shift in consciousness and our frame of reference to go from a feeling of separated relationship with the transcendent or the divine to realizing that all of that is ourself, and it's ourself in relationship between the part that's manifest and the part that's transcended, and what comes through the meeting of both of those parts, way back to what we started talking about at the beginning of all the classes, Hazrat Inayat Khan's metaphor of we're each a ray of light from that divine central sun. We are that whole ray. And at some stage on our journey that really sinks in our being, that whole ray is undergoing a process of transformation, not just what's at the end because of what's at the other end. And furthermore, it's not just that that ray is transforming and being transformed, but as Ravani Rao was referring to, the effect of what happens in our realization with our own ray, our own soul, our own state of beingness, spanning all these different realms, is affecting all of the other realms and is also affected by all of the other realms. So just put a little aside here, if any of you remember this really basic idea in calculus of the integral. It's like taking something and what's the function that it came from? It's like a higher order of it. So what's the higher order of what all this is about? That's what we talk about as the world of the soul. That's what we talk about as the resurrection body. And we can become capable of experiencing that. We can become capable of working with any and all of the divine qualities throughout all those different realms, instead of feeling like we're a separated piece experiencing them. And what we think of, I'll come back and say this again, it's an old notion, I think, to think of the divine as this static, even if static is eternal, omniscient, omnipresent, but just not really affected at all by what happens in existence. But the way Sufis talk about this is like all of existence is the unfoldment that takes place because of this relationship, and the divine side is transformed every bit as much as what we think of as our part on this end of things.
So one way I see the things that we're discussing is that we are fashioning light. We think that we are having a discussion with someone, but there's this varna that makes up our whole being, and all these realms we're speaking about can be fashioned, can be transformed, in that love that we have for everything. That love that the desire that comes through us for, let's say, for art or for music. We think that we are creating a song. We think we're creating a piece of art. But we are fashioning light through that process as our heart is opening and feels the effects back again. It is harmonizing, and it is using all the different wazifas and qualities that there are. We can't see this. But as we develop more as human divine beings and become in resonance with that other side of ourselves, we can begin to see this that we create. And so I think at this point we've said many words, but I think it'd be good to do a practice and to bring it into being. So fashioning light ourselves in our meditation. So I propose that we do one that is about the relationship between the human and the divine. And this would be the divine looking at you, as you say, from the point of view of the divine, Ya Mawjud. So this Mawjud, M-A-W-J-U-D, M-A-W-J-U-D, is making God a reality. So we're thinking of the divine end, the manifest being, as being Mawjud. So when you say Ya Mawjud, you're saying it from the point of view of the divine. And then when you say this other Ya Mabud, M-A-H-B-U-D, it means beloved. You are saying that from the point of view of you as a manifest being toward the divine. And then you go back again to Ya Mawjud, saying it from the divine point of view. And now looking back again. So it would be a reflecting process. You can imagine that the light is reflecting from one side to the other. Sometimes you are perceiving what this other side is giving to you, or you might be just loving that other side, just making it your own relationship here between one side and the other. So I'm going to say it a few times and then I'll ask you to come in and allow it to evolve. Each time that you say it is going to be a little bit different because there's been an effect on the Mawjud side, and then there's an effect on the Mabud side. So kind of relax into it. Feel your heart opening. Feel that relationship with the other side. And as the divine, you're feeling that relationship with the manifest side. And we'll begin. I will begin. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. Join in, please. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. 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 Ya Mawjud. Mabud. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. One more time. Ya Mawjud. Ya Mabud. Now as a practice on the breath, let's do as we inhale, think Mawjud. Mawjud. And as you exhale, Mabud. Feeling as you are this one being, breathing, giving yourself to the other, harmonizing with the other. Feeling the reflection of light with each other. Feeling your heart open to the other. Feel the effects of this radiating outwards. Light shining out. Now just feel the essence of the practice. No words.
So I have a segment I would like to introduce, but before I do, I had a thought related to what Ravani Ra was sharing about the light, fashioning the light. And I was thinking about that, well, I'll use just this very class as an example. So all of you are watching this. Some people are going to watch this later. But hopefully you're feeling something in what we're trying to communicate, which is a result not just of what's coming from us, but our connection with you that's built up over the many, many months that we've been together with these classes. So the light that arises from this. And the way that that you're watching this, let's say you have fiber optic cable. Well, fiber optic cable, all the information of the internet is conveyed by means of light. So there's already what's been and all that's available on the internet. But what's happening right now with this class, it's like some more light has been added to that, which now becomes a part of the light that's available to anybody that accesses the internet in the future. And that's just a very concrete example of this, but I think it's a good metaphor for what takes place when we bring forth the realization that the effects of that are not just happening in what we think of as the realm that is taking place in. You know, we think this is taking place, we're in our house, you're probably in your house, you're watching this, but something is transpiring in our connection, in our state of relational unity, that now light is circulating and the light is increasing. There's a feedback effect, the effect of the light upon the light that adds to what comes next with that. And that's an ongoing process that's taking place in existence. And as Pir Vilayat said, we become capable of participating in the divine programming. And another way of saying that is we become capable of furthering the expression of light and the ways that light can be expressed in all the different realms. So that's just something that just arose from our sharing in the first part of this.
Nice.
So I would like to do a infomercial, so to speak. And what am I selling? I'm selling the value of constriction. And at first you're going, I think I want to change the channel constriction. Ooh, don't want any of that stuff. But wait, stick around. So, as with most anything that we talk about in manifestation, there's two sides of it. There's two ways to look at it. One way to look at constriction is we're just going to curl up and withdraw. We're going to react. Could be we're going to lash out at what we don't like that's apart from us. And that would not be a very helpful aspect of constriction. But Pir Vilayat had this wonderful image he would frequently talk about, saying that the human being is like an inverted cone that's infinite at the top, but converges down to a finite part at the base. And what's the base? Our physical manifestation. And what's important to keep in mind is this whole structure is essential. The point is not to take this finite part and ride the elevator up to the transcendent level and say goodbye to all the difficulties of manifestation, but rather to realize that manifestation is the front line of the further awakening of everything, and that everything is not only us as individuals, it's the collective awakening of humanity and beings in life, and more so than just human beings, but even more than that, it's the awakening of divinity. And in the past, I had thought about awakening divinity in life as like, okay, we're going to make divinity more present in the world. So the divine can wake up here, but it's everything is awakening, not just the manifest part awakening to the other part. And it's not even just what we think of as the other part, the divine being, like Ravani Ross said, it's not the divine looking in a mirror and go, oh, now I can see myself. It's not that either. It's all awakening together. And so I had a realization recently I'd never thought about in this way before. So back to the beautiful scripture of the Bhagavad Gita. And the opening scene is just, I think, the most amazing thing in any scripture I've ever come across, because you don't have too many scriptures that the opening act is a battlefield. Thousands are lined up on one side, thousands are on the other side, and here's the incarnation of God in the chariot with his follower Arjuna, and the whole teaching is Krishna, the way it's traditionally thought, is Krishna is imparting to Arjuna this divine wisdom right in the thick of things. It doesn't get much thicker than that, then you're in a battlefield. And Arjuna is saying, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to fight? And Krishna is saying, it's your dharma, it's your sacred duty, and so on. But what I just came to realize just very recently, this teaching and this awakening was not just about what happened to Arjuna, it was also what happened to Krishna, because Krishna couldn't awaken to these teachings that came forth except for the relationship with Arjuna, except for the relationship with the human side. And those two in relationship together are the catalyst that brought forth this profound, beautiful scripture that forms the basis of the Bhagavad Gita. And all of the scriptures are about relationship. They're all, even in the Upanishads, which, you know, the ultimate aim is non-duality and beyond and transcendent, but it's filled with all these stories of the two sides of, you know, what the Brahma or Vishnu or Shiva are conveying to the manifest being. The story cannot take place without those two sides. The story cannot take place without the limitation and constriction that is an essential part of manifestation. If the light did not and could not converge to a focal point in the human being, so that the human being could come into this relationship with the rest, I think of as the rest of ourself, the divine aspect, and then what comes from those two together comes forth in a different dimension, so to speak. It bursts forth into the new creation. That couldn't happen unless on the human side that light was capable of being focalized like a laser. And it's not exactly the same thing, but it's kind of a metaphor for what's going on. It's like the crystallization. It's the bringing about the quintessence, the distillation of the experiences of life, the wisdom gained from life's experiences is brought back to what we think of as the divine side. And guess what? The divine side is totally transformed by what's brought back. It's not that we're just realizing what was sitting on the other side. That would not be as nearly as wonderful a story as in actuality what's going on. It's the story that requires the participation of both sides, but both sides aren't ever separate. They're really the same being, but they have to be in this state of bi-unity for there to be this relationship. There has to be, and I've said this before, there has to be it could be the tiniest of spaces, the gap between the two sides, because if there were no gap, there couldn't be any distinction, there couldn't be any manifestation.
So what I'd like to add to this story of the two sides is that here we are manifested in life, and a key thing about this manifestation is that we have mostly lived in times when we've forgotten that we are really divine, that we are really connected to everything in the universe, right? Most of our lives, well, no, that we didn't know that, and that we are separated from other things. I mean, that was obvious as we were going through our lives, separate from things that are around us, separate from people that are far away from us. We're separate from the things that we need a lot of the time. All this separation, and also confrontation with difficulties, with loss, with possible, well, extinction. We feel like, well, at some point this body will be gone and that's it, we'll be dead. So that's how most people think about what's happening in life. This is difficulty, misery, loss. And why is this going on? Why are we experiencing this? That is the essential, one of the essential ways of seeing life of those beings in manifestation. And from what I'm realizing recently, it is key to the development of the entire divinity, of the entire human divine, let's say at least, and the universe, really, that there be one of us that has forgotten our divinity, so that there would be development through all of these stages, like we were saying, Azarbash, through realization after realization back to the divine. But again, not just a return. Why? Because in the times when we think that we are alone and that we are in misery, these are the times at which the qualities that we speak about, the amazing ways of seeing things, like, for example, the bravery that I admire so much, let's say in World War II, those people that went into the war. My mother signed up for the duration of the war, however long it took to make sure things are righteous again. People dedicated themselves in many different ways. We as mothers dedicate ourselves to our children, and sometimes the difficulties are just so hard to bear. But what we do in all of this, like I was talking about sculpting light, is that something should emerge triumphant through manifestation. And who is our most wonderful model in this? Christ. And what did Christ say on the cross in the very last moments of his life? My God, why have you forsaken me? So did Jesus even go through these terrible misery and difficulties? Yes. This is the constriction that Azurbash is speaking about in the most extreme form, because in that, this divine one will be able to manifest and realize, perfect, and bring through what only can be brought through by manifest beings. So here is an amazing echo and response to that divine call. And in many different traditions, they say that those that enter into life are given choice. And actually, Azurbash has a story of his own life about this. And they look down into life and they see these difficulties and what's involved, and then in the glories also, and the beauty and the light of the transformation of it. And supposedly each one of us here said, yes, I will go.
Well, and I'd like to talk about something Hazrat Inayat Khan refers to that I think is just so beautiful. He talks about this word, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's Hinduism or Sanskrit, but tarana, which means swimming. And he talks about the ways that a person can go through the waters of life. Well, someone can go through the waters of life and just be drowned by them, or to be almost drowned, you're barely keeping your head above water, or the symbolism of Christ walking on water, what Hazrat Inayat Khan said, that is tarana, that's being able to rise above the conditions of life. And that does not mean what Pir Balat called the spiritual bypass, or just going on a mountaintop and meditating and transcending. It means being right in the thick of things, but not being pulled down by them. And why not being pulled down? It's because we become capable of realizing that we're not limited to just the part we thought was us in physical manifestation, experiencing whatever circumstance it is as a separated being. We come to realize more and more that we are a vast being who exists throughout all of the realms, and we're not spacing out to the other realms. As we've tried to convey in earlier classes, we can come to a state of identity where we feel a unity of our being with light that circulates through all of those different levels, and we can modulate our consciousness to whatever's called for in a particular realm of experience. But when we have that vastness of being, that enables us not just to endure difficulties in life, which everyone has. There's a beautiful story of someone went to the Buddha and they had lost a loved one. And they said, Buddha, can you bring them back to life? And he said, bring me 5 mustard seeds from a house where there's never been loss. And so, of course, they went around to the village. They couldn't find 1 mustard seed. And they realized, well, everyone has loss. That's a part of life. You can't have life, can't have birth without death. You can't have joy without sorrow. We all go through the cycles. We all go through stages and octaves of fana, shattering, and baka, rebirth. But we can get to where Pir Balat did hang gliding, even into his, I think, 70s. And he would talk about the feeling of riding on a thermal, like a hawk rides on a thermal, and you're just being carried upward and upward. And so we can ride the thermals instead of being stuck. We can ride that updraft, but then we're fully participating in the whole thing, that it is all part of the richness of life. And this is what we bring as human divine beings. enables what we think of as the divine to discover aspects of his or her own being that can only take place through the experience in manifestation, just as we discover aspects of the divine being by the relationship we have with, whether we want to call it our personal angel or our personal Lord. So let me segue into something related to this. I've talked before about that in healing, there's two stages the Sufis talk about. There's mu'id, which means restoration to a previous state of balance and health, which is certainly very important. If you're sick, you'd like to be well again. But the Sufis say, well, even beyond that is muhi, which is transformation.
Can you spell those for people?
Mu'id is M-U'-I-D, and muhi, I believe, is M-U-H'-Y-I. And so it's transformation into a state even beyond where you started from. Okay, so keep that in mind. Restoration, transformation. Now let's think about realization. So we could say one stage of realization is a realization of something that is. And I got to put is in quotes because our language doesn't quite have the right word, but you could say an already existent state of transcendence in which there's just such a wealth of wisdom to be gained from that. But beyond that, that's similar to mu'id, similar to restoration, realization. There's what I would say is participation in the ongoing unfoldment in the new creation. That we could say it's the purpose of our life to not only become capable of doing that, but to actually do that, to actualize that in our life. We've talked about everything being Gabriel. Everything is seeking to reveal itself. Each of us has a unique part of our being that we're yearning to be able to show in a unique way of light relationship, or lighting, I'll call it, the way that our light emanates and relates to everything. And similarly, we have a desire to experience the never-ending amazement and beauty of the unique light that comes from everything else. Everything also is Gabriel. And everything is now furthering octaves and harmonics and overtones of what's been in the previous instant of new creation. It's like, this is a recent thought also, you know, that for centuries, mystics have talked about the music of the spheres. And so you might think, okay, you finally got your receiver to where you can tune into it. Oh, this beautiful celestial angelic music, and you're just listening to it. But you're contributing to that music, and everything else is contributing to it, and it never repeats. It's not a rerun. It's always fresh. And we can become capable of being able to be in life in that way. And well, the possibilities for how we experience the divine qualities, the possibilities of how those very qualities themselves are transformed not only by our own experience, but our way of relationship with everything else that we're experiencing. And as we mentioned earlier, all the fruits of that are put into the hopper for and made available to everything else in all of existence, which furthers the possibilities of what can happen. So now you have this cosmic chain reaction, so to speak, of the emergence of new creation. So I'd like to share an image that came to me. So, and we could do this kind of like a meditation. So close your eyes and imagine your soul as the ray of light that comes from that divine central sun, that unique ray of light that moves through all the spheres, all the way down into manifestation. Now imagine that through much insight and realization and meditation and working with practices, you've discovered how to awaken the awareness of your being existing in each of these different realms that Ravani Rao was referring to, including the angelic realm, the jinn realm, and so on. Now let's use our creative imagination faculty. So imagine that you've not only awakened the realization of yourself as a human divine being, this relationship between your manifest human part and what we think of as your divine part, but the same capability has now been actualized in all of the realms in which you exist. So imagine now in the angelic realm that you are able to experience yourself as an angelic divine being, this relationship between the two parts and what now can unfold from that. And in the jinn realm, the same thing, you're a jinn divine being. So now this ray of light that started out to be kind of like a straight ray of light, like a sunbeam, has all these branching off points corresponding to each of the different realms. And the fullness of what you bring through in each realm now becomes like a miniature sun, like the sun, the central sun that Mersha talks about, from which your soul emerged. Now in each of the realms, your soul becomes as a miniature central sun in that realm that is now emanating forth light. So now the image, instead of just a ray from that sun, has all these miniature suns all along the way shining out light. So it's like this branching pattern. And if you can imagine still further, imagine many, many other rays of other beings coming from the sun, the same thing, all the branching, like all these stars. So now the universe in your creative imagination is filled with stars of beings. And there's stars in the angelic realm, there's stars in the jinn realm, there's stars even in the realm of just qualities. And the light of all these stars is interplaying with the light of all the other stars. Each star different, each quality of light different from each one. Now I'm just going to say a combination of practices and just listen and think them in your own mind. The combination is going to be Yad Nur, the light of the celestial realm. Ya Jamil, Jamil, the light of divine beauty. Ya Ba'ith, Baith, which means the resurrection. So now, see if you can just experience, as I'm saying this sequence of divine names, how this light furthers the divine beauty that brings about a furtherance of the resurrection throughout all of existence. Ya Nur, Ya Shamil, Ya Ba'ith. Ya Nur, Ya Shamil, Yanur. Yashamir. Yadai. Yanur. Yashamir. Yadai. Yanur. Yashamir. Yadai. Yanur. Yashamir. Yadai. Yanur. Yashamir. Yadai.
Well, this is the conclusion of this section of our class. And I'd like to encourage all of you to review some of the different things that we proposed and practices from tonight, and bring your own touch to them, bring your own love to them. Now we can continue with our participation part.